WatchCharts is the world's leading secondary watch market research platform. Dive into the data yourself at WatchCharts.com. The cliche is you ask a non-enthusiast to picture a watch, and a Submariner is probably what they picture. That's how ubiquitous this watch has become over time. It really is one of the most important watches of the 20th century and an almost idealized archetype of its genre, the dive watch. Well, one of our viewers asked us to cover it, so here it is. How do you get the best value for your money if you're thinking about buying one on the secondary market? We'll look at some considerations and propose some picks, explain our reasoning, and share some market data and active listings. As always, we welcome you to check out the listings and the rest of the data for yourself at WatchCharts.com. Let us know in the comments if there are other watches you'd like us to cover. We'll start off the discussion with just a comparison of the Rolex brand index and the Submariner collection index over the last 3 years. So the index is the top 30 watches in the brand and in the Submariner collection by transaction value, also weighted in that index by transaction value, and then plotted here as a comparison chart over the last 3 years to show how much relative gain or loss each of these indexes has achieved over that time period. And so in blue, which is the Rolex Market Index, which of course has precious metal watches, two-tone watches, steel watches, professional watches, classic watches, Datejust, Submariners, GMT Masters, Daytonas, pretty much the entirety of the Rolex product catalog, is up about 40% over the last 3 years, whereas the Submariner Market Index is only up about 31% over the same time period. But what we also see is that it didn't experience as much of a spike and hype last year as opposed to the broader Rolex market. And I think that sort of tracks with what an enthusiast might understand about how much more hype, relatively speaking, there was around the GMT Master, for example, or certainly the Daytona compared to the Submariner. The Submariner in that hierarchy is seen as more of a stepping stone towards those other watches rather than the other way around. And so given that, the Daytona and some of those other model families are also represented in the Rolex Index, it makes sense that would have seen more of a peak, as much as over 80% of the value 3 years ago for the index. But since then, or basically since last year, since the correction started, the trend has largely been the same for the Submariner as the broader Rolex market. So there's not anything really that interesting going on in terms of like something very specific about the Submariner that makes it different. Value retention for models in production as of Feb 2023 was the fourth highest out of all Rolex model families. And that's about half the value retention of the GMT Master family, which we discussed in the Best Value for Money GMT video published recently. And so in absolute terms, yes, it's still a sort of overall positive value retention number. And if you buy these watches at retail, you will see appreciation in those values, but that continues to be the fact, even though they've seen somewhat of a decline over the last year in a market correction. So what we want to do next is make some picks. And the way we will go about making those picks is first give you our picks for the best value steel Submariners with a black dial and a green dial, and we'll talk about why we think that's an interesting distinction to make. And then we'll give you our best value for money picks for a two-tone and a precious metal Submariner as well. The data that we'll be looking at includes the reference numbers, the years of production, retail price if it's currently in production, the market price as of mid-May, the market price range, the 1 year delta for the market price, the volatility, which is just a measure of how much variation we see in listing prices, and then value retention, which is a measure of how much over or below the retail price, the current market value is trending. So the current production references are the 124060, the 126610 LN, and the 126610 LV in steel. These were all introduced in 2020. They have market prices ranging from around $12,000 to about $17,000. They all retain a considerable chunk of their value, and they all have really low volatility, which all sort of tracks with the fact that these are the most recent production and current production references for the Submariner family. Of course, if you go one generation back, then you can add in a few more. The ones that you see highlighted in green for the reference number are the ones that have green bezels. And what you'll see is that basically as we continue to kind of go backwards until you really sort of start hitting the properly vintage category, if you just go back to the 1980s and sort of stop there, all of the references that have been made for the Submariner in steel are listed here along with their production years and their market prices. And what you'll see is there's only 3 that have ever been made with green bezels. The 126610 LV, the 116610 LV, which was its predecessor, and then the very first one, which was the 16610 LV. And so what we want to do is, for that reason, because they are sort of from a design standpoint their own sort of little niche within the Submariner family, treat them as their own separate category, and then treat the remaining steel references in one bucket. So the question of which of these would be the best value for money, I think for each of those dials comes down to these selections. For the green dial, we would recommend I would pick the 126610 LV, and then for the black dial, I would pick the 114060. So what we'll do is we'll dive into those a little bit deeper. The 114060 is now out of production. It's the previous generation basic no-date Submariner. Its current market price is just shy of $11,000, and it has relatively higher volatility than the current generation. But if you look at its 5-year price trend, it's basically seen appreciation, over the long term, and it is likely the case that this watch traded at or above its retail value for the entirety of the time range shown here. But in terms of value, this is, I think, a better pick than the 124060, because these watches you can still get at most at this stage 11 years old, which for Rolex's modern production standards means you're essentially getting a watch that doesn't have a lot of wear on it from a movement and innards standpoint, and sort of like the mechanics of the watch standpoint, even though the cosmetic condition of the watch, if it's 10 years old, may not be perfect, but you get a movement that is good enough. You get a visual representation of the design, which is indistinguishable from its current implementation at first glance. And so there really is nothing from a functionality or an aesthetic standpoint that you're compromising with, purchasing this watch. Whereas if you compare it to the 124060, that has more of a market premium. So in that comparison, I think this one comes out ahead. And then also, I think for my personal taste, I prefer the no date version of this watch. And for that reason as well, I'm sort of happy to highlight here, a recent listing for this watch that is from April 27. This is on Rolex forums from a dealer that has substantial amount of positive feedback and is listed just $50 below the market price that we quote for this watch. And it's for a watch from 2019. So it is, the papers on it are probably going to be 4 years old, which means there's not a lot of time left on the Rolex warranty. But nevertheless, for this price, there's a listing right now that is available should you be interested in buying this watch at this price. Let's look at the green dial pick next. This is the reference 126610 LV. It's been in production since 2020 and has a market price just shy of $17,000. It's seen more of a drop over the last year than the plain Jane 114060 has, but I think that just sort of is indicative of the hype cycle that this watch has gone through. Even so, today its value retention is 56%, which is the highest of all of the current production steel Submariners. And because it's green and because of green's association with the story and the brand of Rolex, this will always, I think, remain an exceptional watch, so to speak. And for this one, the current generation makes more sense because if you compare the 126610 LV with the 1160 LV, the 116610 actually trades at a far higher price than this one. So that has a current market price of $20,500. So for less money, you're getting a more modern watch with potentially even time left on the warranty. So just in terms of value for money, this would be the obvious better pick. A recent listing for this one from the 1st of May is for $16,295, which is, again, slightly below the market price that we compute for this reference. And it's also from a seller on Rolex forums who has a considerable amount of positive feedback. So, and this one is just from late last year. So it has almost all of its warranty still left. So in that regard, this is a fairly attractive listing for anyone interested in purchasing this watch. We'll move on from steel to now cover two-tone references. And two-tone Submariners are a real vibe because I think the association of the blue dial versions in particular with this vision of excess from the 80s and 90s, I think is certainly in my mind a very strong memory. And so that's how I always sort of think of this watch. But I think within this category, the value for money pick is, for my money, would probably be the 116613 LN, which was made from 2009 to 2020 and has a current market price of $14,700. And the reason that I picked this one in particular is because I think of all of these references, if you want to stay within the modern family but don't want to pay the unnecessary premium over retail prices that the current production models represent, then actually with the previous generation, if you can get one that's not too old, there's not much of a step down in terms of the watch that you're getting for the amount of money that you're spending. And also, between the black dial and the blue dial, the black dial is slightly cheaper, which also just tracks with my preferences, because I think this watch, maybe partly because of sort of some sort of reaction to that earlier recollection of what this watch meant, I think it looks better with a black bezel. But that's also just because I think black and gold are a very nice combination, but there's not too much of it here, so it doesn't look sort of saturated like a solid gold, yellow gold or rose gold Submariner might. There isn't a rose gold Submariner, but hypothetically speaking, if there were. And, this one, again, over the last 5 years has, steadily sort of appreciated in value and is still more or less where it was in terms of, value appreciation about a year ago. And given that it's not in production, there's only so many of them out there. A recent listing for this one is available for $13,995, which again is below our market price. Also on Rolex forums, also from a reputable dealer. And this one is from 2017. So it is a little bit older, but then also you're getting, quite a bit of a discount on the market price for this particular listing. And then precious metal is an interesting category to look at because I think there's obviously the oxymoronic nature of a solid precious metal tool watch, but also a question of whether the aesthetics of the Speedmaster design are better suited to an execution in a colored metal or in just like sort of steel, or like sort of a silvery metallic sort of sheen. And the white gold Submariners, I think, interestingly enough, offer that experience because if you don't really know what you're looking at, and if you don't have an eye for the differentiation between white gold and steel, it's just going to look like any other sort of standard steel watch. But for my money, I think the best pick here is the 126619 LB in white gold, which is available in current production. It's actually trading slightly. It has a market price range that dips way below its retail price, and even at the higher end, barely crosses the retail price of 42,000, with a current market price of 39,300. And that's sort of been, a steady decline in its market value ever since the watch became available. And I think the reason that this makes it particularly interesting is because in the longer term, if you look again at the distinction between the white gold and yellow gold references, how many more yellow gold references there are, how much more recent white gold as an introduction to the Submariner line is, how much rarer just in terms of overall availability the white golds are going to be, and how they have that added sort of like stealth factor, and the fact that from the current production models, this is one that trades for slightly less than retail. I think if you're not just trying to sort of say, I want to spend the least amount of money within this category and get away with something that is respectable, maybe like the 116618 LN. I think if you want to get a watch that really captures the essence of this category in a way that the yellow gold, for my money, just can't, but also represents excellent value because relative to the long term and relative to its relative rarity, the white gold does not seem to be valued very well by the market at this moment for some reason. I'm not quite sure why that would be, but the design of this watch is just beautiful. The black dial with the blue bezel, I think is a very fetching look. And if you wanted to get one, you can get one for far below retail on eBay right now. Here's a listing from the 2nd of May from a seller that on eBay has a considerable amount of positive feedback. So hopefully this video was helpful in covering some of these references that we think are the best value for money in the Submariner family. If you have a Submariner, or if you're interested in buying a Submariner and would pick one of our picks or would have picked differently, let us know in the comments below, and we will see you on Friday. Thanks for listening.